100 lat, niech żyje, żyje nam. 100 lat, 100 lat, niech żyje nam. Jeszcze raz, niech żyje, żyje nam. Niech żyje nam. A to dziadziu. Życzymy, życzymy. Życzymy i zdrowia, i szczęścia, i błogosławieństwa.
In February of 1971, Malgorzata Lorenz was born in the small farm town of Ikrzynia, Poland. Under the influence of the Soviet Union, Poland faced decades of institutionalized poverty and political censorship. While Ikrzynia was rural enough not to experience the harshest tactics of communist rule, Malgorzata's parents still faced the all-too-familiar challenge of putting food on the table. The Soviets' complicated rationing system not only forced Poles to wait in lines for hours for the most basic necessities, but it also prompted hunger strikes in the nation's cities. Faced with providing for his family, Malgorzata's father, Jozef, spent days away from home working as a cab and truck driver, eventually switching over to working construction as a crane operator. However, despite his hard work, Jozef's paycheck paled in comparison to the money that could come from another option: America. While there was technically no official conversion rate at the time, the US dollar carried significantly more worth than the Polish currency, złoty, as there were stores that sold Western goods and accepted American currency. After the unlikely opportunity of receiving a tourist visa, Jozef traveled to the US to provide a better life for his wife, Zofia, and his 4 children, Mariusz, Agata, Malgorzata, and Dariusz.
So he left in 78. So back in the day, it was the era where everybody was seeking a better life, and many people were, if they could flee, if they could go to another country to make a better life, and send dollars to Poland, they were doing that. Of course, it was very hard to leave. Just to get a visa to come to the States was not an easy thing. And it was even harder to leave Poland because they wouldn't give you a passport. But my dad was able to do it because he had family here. His brother was here, his 2 sisters were here.
While originally planning to stay for 6 months, an eye injury sustained from a work accident prevented Jozef from working. While he eventually returned to work and frequently sent back money and gifts to Zofia and their children, recurring operations raised concern between the 2 parents, who ultimately decided on finding a way for the family to reunite. However, instead of Jozef coming home, the Lorenz family would opt to join their father in the US.
So once he came here, he worked for my uncle who had a construction company, and while on the construction site, a nail went through his eye, and he had like 7 operations. And so his eye was never the same, basically because he was still under a doctor's care. He and my mom were able to make the case that, he cannot come back to Poland to reunite with his family because he was under a doctor's care because of his medical condition. And so that basically kind of propelled our case. So when we came, we were in a much better position than many other people who came because we already came with papers.
In total, the process took more than 4 years. With 4 children, lots of luggage, and 42 months after Jozef's originally planned return date, Zofia and her children left the only home they had ever known for a better life in Chicago, Illinois. Malgorzata is my mother. She and her siblings still reside in the Chicago suburbs, where they are each just a short drive away from their parents' home. My grandparents worked tirelessly as blue-collar workers, cleaning the floors of Chicago skyscrapers as janitors for nearly 12 years before retiring in 1998. After moving twice, seeing all 4 kids get married, becoming grandparents, and surviving health issues, they ultimately lived in America longer than they did in Poland, even obtaining citizenship and voting, all while never learning to speak English. Growing up, my siblings and I spent every day after school at their house. We were always close, and still are to this day. However, Jaju passed away in 2023 at the age of 83. I won't touch on his death any more than this. All the worrying I did as a kid about not knowing Polish and never being able to really talk to him suddenly seemed so ridiculous. I have no doubt he knew I loved him, and vice versa. However, I gotta say that my relationship with my grandparents always felt complicated. You see, my mom was the only one out of her siblings to marry an American. Now, I love my dad. He and my mom are great parents who have always made sure my siblings and I were safe, healthy, and above all, loved. But when I look at my cousins and their families, I would always notice how they seemed more Polish than ours.
Some of the differences that we grew up with being more American, it definitely at some times it felt like we were kind of missing out a little bit on the culture that our mom was born into. There's an interesting mix. Like when you have just some of one thing and some of the other, it's almost like you can get like a feeling of like, what am I? Like, where do I stand? Like, I kind of want to be a little bit more of this, but I know I'm not. And it kind of just leaves you with like almost like a bit of like a desire to have more of it, for sure. When you have cousins that come back and they tell you about basically this land that you've only heard of and how it's different, it leaves you wondering like, well, what's that like? I want to go. I want to see what it is. I mean, it's where our mom's from. You know, I think like the way we grew up though, you know, like you, me, and Zofia, at least for me, I kind of knew that going to Poland was something that I could just only do when I'm older, because the plane tickets costed a lot of money. But hearing, you know, my other cousins getting to go, it definitely put a desire in my heart, like, okay, when I'm older and I can afford it, I'm going to find a way to go and see this for myself. And that, it became a bucket list item for me very early on in my life, I'd say.
Let me make something clear. I had a childhood that many people would have killed for. I'm just trying to say that I always felt like the rich culture I was descended from was less accessible to me. With Jaju gone, we all became very worried about Babcia. We started spending a lot more time at her place. I tried showing her new hobbies. Some of us really tried making her say yes to getting a dog. She started doing fine on her own, but we didn't take our eyes off of her. It was around this time that my ciocia, Agata, reminded me of our plan to travel to Poland. A year or two before, I had mentioned to her that since I was older now, I'd just spend the cash and go by myself if I had to. I was tired of waiting and wanted to make my dream a reality. Right on the spot, ciocia offered to go with me, and my older brother, Joseph, said he would come too. But with Jaju getting worse at the time, we put the trip off to the side. However, seeing as how he was gone now and Babcia was doing her best to adapt, the three of us agreed that we had to convince Babcia to come with. At first, as my ciocia would say, it was like pulling teeth. However, one thing seemed to tug at her heart the most. You see, when my mom's family left for America, they left a lot of people behind, like my Babcia's siblings, her younger brother, Antek, and her big sister, Hela. Antek tragically passed away before I was born, but Hella still resides in her hometown of Kroshchenko, which borders Ikskshinya. Babcia and Jaju had visited to see them before, but the last time had been over 18 years ago. Babcia and Hella remained in touch, but hadn't seen each other in nearly 2 decades. When you take that in consideration, I'm sure you can guess how we were able to get Babcia to say yes. And with that, a childhood dream was set to be fulfilled. A boy, his brother, his aunt, and his 80-year-old grandmother planned to take a 2-week trip of a lifetime to their motherland. Part 2 is coming soon, I promise.